All right, guys, today we're going to be talking about interviews. And not just normally how we talk about interviews on this channel, but we're going to talk about the interview process, what it's become, where it's been, and where I think it's going. So the reason why I want to make this video is because a couple different tech YouTubers have given their opinions on whether or not they think coding interviews are broken. So I kind of want to throw my hat in the ring and give my opinion as well. So honestly, coding interviews today are pretty insane. Just about any candidate applying to almost any company nowadays, whether it be a big end company, a FANG company, or really even a startup, I think has to know these crazy data structures, algorithms, and system design concepts. Otherwise, they can't really pass the interview. For a topic like data structures alone, there's so many different data structures that you need to know. You need to know the runtimes, you need to know how to use them, when to use them, and why. And honestly, I don't really want to name all the different data structures, but there's a ton of different data structures that you'll need to know before you even walk into interviews nowadays. But an extremely abridged version of what those data structures might include are things like single and multidimensional arrays, linked lists, stacks, queues, trees, and graphs. And remember, those are just the data structures. Now you actually need to talk about the algorithms that you're going to use on those different data structures or in conjunction with those different data structures to solve whatever crazy problems that you get from your interviewer. And now to give an abridged version of all the algorithms that you guys might need to know before even stepping into an interview nowadays, you guys are going to need to know things like merge sort, quick sort, radix sort, top sort, BFS, DFS, binary search, other tree traversals, other graph traversals, as well as things like shortest path algorithms, including Floyd-Warshall's, Dijkstra's, Bellman-Ford, and the list kind of goes on and on. And again, these are really by no means an exhaustive list of the different data structures and algorithms that you guys probably need to know to land a job at these large companies. And then you have the whole topic of system design and distributed system design and API design, and I really don't even want to get into that in this video. So it really kind of makes you think, like, how did we actually get to this point, right? This is insane. How could anyone know all this information? How could you expect someone to regurgitate these different algorithms in conjunction with these different data structures to solve some random crazy riddle on a whiteboard? And not only that, but do that 4 or 5 times in a day and do so perfectly. Because of that, I think we should kind of take a look at historically where interviews used to be. So before all this craziness happened and all these different expectations were put on the candidates, Google and other large tech companies used to do things in the early 2000s like ask candidates brain teasers. So some of the questions that they would actually ask the candidates were things like, why are manhole covers round? You have a 3-gallon jug and a 5-gallon jug. How do you measure exactly 4 gallons? And my personal favorite, you are shrunk to the size of a nickel, you're thrown in a blender, and the blades start in 60 seconds. What do you do? And if these aren't even stranger and weirder to you, I honestly kind of think you should reflect on that. While these brain teasers could definitely show how people think creatively, I definitely don't think it's one of those things where you should get a job because you can say what you would do if you're shrunk to the size of a nickel and thrown in a blender. Oftentimes these riddles were also like any other riddle, and if you had heard the answer, you knew what to say. So for example, I know that manhole covers are round because no matter how you position the manhole cover, it will never fall through its circular opening. And just because I know that, that doesn't mean that I work at Google, but maybe I should have taken my interview 10 years ago. Google then went on to use other interesting methods to hire candidates by posting a billboard that read first 10-digit prime in consecutive digits of E.com. And so what this actually was when eventually someone found the first 10 prime consecutive digits of E and went to that number.com, they were then posed other riddles that basically had them apply to Google. Can you actually imagine if you had gotten a job by doing that, by going to that URL, solving some riddle, interviewing at Google, and then actually getting the job, and someone asked you, oh, how'd you get your job? Yeah, I mean, it was pretty simple. I remember it was about 10 years ago. I think I found the first 10-digit prime found in consecutive digits of E. And yeah, the rest was history. So that is kind of how interviews for tech started, and now I think it's important to talk about what they've become. So we've since kind of moved on from these very interesting recruiting tactics like posting billboards and asking candidates random brain teasers about blenders. And I think this is largely in thanks to someone named Gail Lackman McDowell, who wrote Cracking the Coding Interview. So while I think that this book was actually really good for our industry in the sense that it reeled us back in terms of something that was more realistic to test candidates on, I think it was also troublesome in the sense that it really today has defined a standard for what you need to know as baseline knowledge to actually interview at these large tech companies and give yourself a good shot at getting these jobs. So fast forward a few years since Gail Lackman McDowell wrote that book, in 2008, and I actually think that that general baseline for what you need to know as an engineer to actually get jobs at these different companies has grown from here to somewhere around here now. And the reason why I think that that baseline has grown is because I don't think that you can necessarily just read cracking the coding interview, understand the different questions and data structures in it, and have a solid chance at landing these different jobs. And oftentimes nowadays, I even wonder if knowing these basic data structures and algorithms is really even enough in the first place to really give yourself a good shot at succeeding during these interviews. And I think that that's strongly reflected in all the different interviewing services that are out there today, as well as all the different content on YouTube and other places to help you prepare for your coding interviews. Kind of like my channel. Nowadays, to really give yourself the best chance at passing these interviews, I think you need to know even more advanced data structures like Fenwick trees, segment trees, Fibonacci heaps, tries, and Turing lists. And to be totally honest, I just made up that last one, but it's probably going to be something soon enough. And so what I initially thought was actually something that was good, that was reeling us back in from these crazy billboards and brain teasers, has become something that is bad. I think we set a pretty solid baseline to kind of ground ourselves in something that's more realistic, like writing code to evaluate candidates, to something that again has kind of drifted off from what it should be. I think the problem with interviews nowadays is that they're starting to stray too far from reality. What once started as a way for you to demonstrate that you understand how data structures and algorithms work and how to utilize them to write performant code has now dissolved again. In a weird way, we've kind of like dissolved back into this state of solving weird riddles, except instead of them being on billboards, they're just on whiteboards. So now that we understand what interviews have become, now I want to talk about where I think interviews are headed. So some interviews I've had have actually tried to mix data structures and algorithms as well as more realistic tasks you might do on the job as a software engineer day to day, and I honestly think that this is probably where interviews are going to head towards. I think that it's possible that by relaxing the data structures and algorithms portion of interviews and incorporating more day-to-day tasks you might do as an engineer realistically, like writing tests, refactoring code, and structuring classes, I think would probably be a pretty good indication as to whether or not you would be a good engineer at that company. So this whole video is really to say that I don't think necessarily that coding interviews are broken, but rather that this is what we believe to be the best way to assess candidates today. The same way that back in the early 2000s, we thought that asking you what you would do if you were thrown into a blender was also a good way to evaluate you. The coding interview process has constantly been evolving since the early 2000s, right? We moved from something like asking brain teasers and posting questions on billboards to something more realistic like writing code, and now I think that we just strayed too far off the deep end. Code can always be refactored, and honestly, the interview process is no different. Kind of like in the early 2000s, I think eventually people question this process and realize that it might not be the best way to evaluate candidates, come up with something better, and the industry will move towards that. But until that actually happens, be sure to check out all the other videos on my channel to help you guys prepare for your interviews. If you guys found this video helpful and enjoyed it, be sure to leave it a like and subscribe to the channel for more, and I'll see you guys next time.